Finally, remember that you can get subtitles in several languages. Down on your left side, there is a small button saying CC. This is where you click to choose a caption in your preferred language. Small button down on your left side corner. And with all of this sorted out, it is time to start. Once again, welcome to Talk2Connect. My name is Lisa Tallroth, and today is the last webcast of the season. And as 2023 is coming to an end, we will remind ourselves of what we have learned this year, but we will also use today's session to prepare ourselves for the year to come. Looking at today's agenda, you can see that we have representatives from two of the most important players in Europe for return. First out, the EU Return Coordinator Marie Juritsch, the first person ever to hold this position. And she will tell us about her first 1.5 years on the job and how she sees the role for return counsellors changing in the years to come. Great to see that you are ready, Marie. And Frontex has, as you might know, taken on a new role since 2019. And Operational Officer Jasper Swanenberg will join us to explain the cornerstones of Frontex operational strategy. You are ready from Warsaw, Jasper. And then my third guest, Stijn Kwanten, you will give us a first-hand experience of what Frontex has to offer, as you will give us a sneak peek of a lecture on communication and culture, a course otherwise exclusive for Frontex trainings that will be later on today. And standing besides me here in the studio, my colleague Pernilla, you have an important task today. What is that?
I will keep an eye on the chat, and we will welcome everyone in the audience to write the questions directly in the chat. So we will take care of them when we have our Q&A.
Yeah. That is important. Take the chance to post your questions straight to our guests. Pernilla will pick them up for the Q&A later. That is the chat you use for that. Okay, thank you, Pernilla. See you later. But first, we hope that the Talk2Connect webcasts, webinars and podcasts have brought you some insights this year and hopefully benefited to the important work that return counsellors perform every day across Europe and in countries of origin. We have put together a short summary to remind ourselves of the people we have met and talked to during this year, and let's take a look at that. In the beginning of the year, we went to Brussels and learned how return counselling works in Belgium. We visited designated return desks at NGO Caritas and also the state agency FedAsil that has a return desk in Liège. Next up in the spring was Albania and the SOS Children's Village in Tirana, who support returning unaccompanied minors. From the Swedish municipality Strömsund, we also learned about the importance to include all the stakeholders surrounding a minor returnee. Our next trip was to Erbil in Kurdistan region of Iraq. On site, the major local service provider ETTC explained what kind of support they can offer to Iraqi returnees. And as we went along in the fourth webcast before summer, we talked about the fairly new Danish setup where a designated state agency supports migrants who got their application denied and needs to return. In September, a journey that started in Paris and moved on to Dakar showed us how the French agency OFI works with their so-called all-inclusive approach. OFI stays with the returnee every step of the way, from the suburbs of Paris to starting a new life in Senegal. And the gender-specific challenges women faces, that was our topic in October, with insights brought to us from IOM and Cameroon. And then last time in November, we focused on economic reintegration and how this is intertwined with both social and psychosocial support. We had cases from Bangladesh and Pakistan. And as I said before, all these webcasts are still available on YouTube. Search for Talk2Connect Return if you missed any. So, as you can imagine, we have seen many examples of how return and reintegration may be organized, and it differs. We have talked to representatives of state agencies and NGOs. We have seen examples of different cultures and different national legislation. But at the center of all this, we keep coming back to the question of what can be accomplished through counselling. The challenges, the limits and the possibilities that a single counsellor faces every day in his interaction with people in need of support. And this is the core business for Talk2Connect, Return Counselling, and it is of course something I want to discuss with my first guest. So therefore, welcome, joining us from Brussels, Marie Juritsch. Welcome to Talk2Connect. You are the first EU return coordinator ever. You started this job in May 2022, and well, to put it shortly, it's your responsibility to establish an effective European return policy so that more migrants without applications return to their countries of origin. Now it's been 1.5 years on the job. How has it been so far? What has been your focus, Marie?
Thank you and for the invitation, and good afternoon, everyone. Well, maybe just a small correction. My job is to support coherent and consistent implementation of EU return policies. So in a very pragmatic and practical manner. I'm essentially supported by a high-level network for returns, which is also a novelty of the new Pact of Migration and Asylum. This network consists of senior representatives of member states, Frontex and EU Asylum Agency. This network is placed now for 1 good year. And I'm proud to say that we have become a community that is not just talking, but also doing the walk. Our work is guided by operational strategy for more effective returns, which also did not exist before, and we have developed that. Our focus is on what we internally can do to make returns work. We figure out together how to make better use of available opportunities and common tools, Frontex being one of them. And as member states' national return systems and operational realities vary quite a lot, the idea is to connect those who have figured out, who have established a solution or a good practice with those who are still looking for a solution to a challenge that they're dealing with.
So that is quite a lot you have accomplished already in only 1.5 years. And just to remind you, why do you think this role was needed in the first place? This is a new function created under the new Pact on Migration and Asylum. And just give us a bit of a background why it's installed.
Well, it has been said many times also during these training sessions that you have had that returns are a complex and very sensitive field of work. Returns should serve the credibility of migration management and our asylum systems, as well as the functioning of the entire Schengen area, from external borders to security dimension and fundamental rights. So returns have multiple functions. And to add to the complexity, we are highly dependent on third country cooperation. So it's a very complicated field of work. But as I said, my work and that of the high-level network focuses on the internal aspects of return. And there the complexity and the need for coordination comes from the fact that within member states, returns are typically a shared responsibility between different authorities. Moreover, typically, these authorities have other responsibilities as well, and return may not be a priority at all. There is a high number of stakeholders and different operational actors. And typically in a situation like this, and this is also the case for return, there are major communication and coordination challenges between authorities. Often there is no national overview of return situation, upcoming challenges, and resources made available for the job. So therefore, a better coordination at EU level and also at national level is a must.
And you operate clearly on a high structural level with policy and so forth. If you can help myself and the viewers who are typically caseworkers, return counsellors, to understand how this will affect their work. How do you see the job for the European return counsellors evolve these upcoming years?
Well, when it comes to our in the operational strategy that guides our work, we have a lot of priority actions that we are looking at, and there are lots of actions for the reasons that member state systems are different, and they have a lot of slightly different problems and also different kind of maturity level in relation to returns. So now looking at the role of return counselling, well, as you know, for almost 2 years now, EU has had the dedicated strategy for assisted voluntary return and reintegration. And this strategy has underlined the importance and is essentially built on return counselling as a key competence to promote voluntary returns. In the operational strategy that we have established, we actually, in the high-level network, we try to take return counselling even further. So we would like it to become a part of all return case management, irrespective we are talking about voluntary returns or involuntary returns. And we would like that return counselling is understood and seen as a key capability, and it should become a core professional competence in all member states' return systems. So I think this is the main message from what we are trying to achieve in relation to return counselling.
A key competence, you say. And yet, as we've seen during this year, we talked to so many different stakeholders within return and reintegration, and we see how counsellors face quite different tasks. I mean, they can work with various resources, with various pressure to reach closure. They can work for state agencies or NGOs. The fact that it is so differently organized today, what are your thoughts on these differences? Is that the landscape and as it should be, or do you aim to change this?
Well, for me, it seems that we are just in the beginning of discovering and establishing this capability. And indeed, there are quite some different perceptions what return counselling is all about and what should be its components. I think overall, well, the realities are quite different and there is no one format or one size fits for all. So I think there is a lot to explore, there is a lot to develop. And in the end, we should have a common toolbox. And that's also foreseen in the strategy that there are different kinds of approach to return counselling. But I think we are still learning what these tools could be, and we are also learning to utilize that. But as I said, the experiences that I have seen being gained and from the exchanges that I have been part of, I really believe very much in the future of return counselling, and I would like to see it becoming a regular, normal part of all return case management, not on add-on, but it really would foreseen as a core feature of our return systems.
And do you expect the single return counsellor to connect to the EU strategy? I mean, in your everyday work, you have the national framework to handle, and that can be a handful only to keep up with that, and you have the demands from your organization. How vivid do you expect the EU strategy to be for the single caseworker in Belgium or Germany?
Well, for instance, you're having this series of these webcasts to discuss what all this means for those who are working as return counselors. So I think it's all about, as I said, it's about discovering the potential, exploring the potential, sharing the experiences, piloting things, learning from each other. I think it's still something that is taking shape, but that's good. That's good, and I'm really happy that there's an initiative like that where people with the webcam, you can bring a lot of audiences together and share the experiences have been made. And I think they're really very interesting pilots ongoing, and I hope that the experiences will be shared. And this, as I said, I see there is enormous potential. The communication, like always, as my job is to coordinate and ensure that there's a better coordination. And I believe that when we're looking at the case management of returnees, the key obstacle is communication, and the fact that we're not really connecting to returnees, and they're human beings and we're working with human beings. So I really think that there's a lot more we can do in return counselling. So I have been very impressed about what I've seen so far, but I see we are just in the beginning of our journey.
And can you say something about the challenges that you see? I mean, cooperation within the EU system is always challenging. I mean, you have all these member states trying to find a common ground. But what is specific when it comes to return, the work on return? What type of challenges comes with that?
Well, if I formulate it in diplomatically, I a little bit hinted already that I see there is the limited cooperation between authorities, communication, collaboration. It could be much better between those numerous operational actors and stakeholders in return domain. Also, I think there's a lot we could do better when it comes to return case management. I think we have not really established what does it take to manage return cases properly and what kind of capabilities are needed. And what has been also established in many Schengen evaluations, the resources probably are not sufficient. So that's another issue. I also believe that we would work much better together if we would have a common understanding of the return situation. So we would have a kind of a situational awareness as we have in many fields of work. So in order to take good decisions and make good use of your resources, you need to know what you're working with. And I think there's quite a lot to achieve in this regard, because that would then enable us really to plan our work better and not just react to situations, but really look ahead and think about what makes sense to do. In the end, none of us can do everything, and we need to set priorities, and we really need to learn to act together. Different authorities inside member states and also at EU level member states together. So this is what we need to build up, and I don't see any other way but to try to be first on the same page.
And we will soon hear from Jasper Swanenberg at Frontex more about the path forward and how the operational strategy is setting this into place and in reality. But first, Pernilla, I call you in since you are keeping an eye on the chat. I don't know if there is any question for Mari already.
Not especially for Mary, so I think we just save them for the Q&A.
Yeah. We will have a Q&A later on in the show, so and I will welcome you back then, Mari Juritsch. But thank you for now. We have more questions for you, be sure. But for now, it's time to bring in our next guest. And joining us from the Frontex head office in Warsaw, we have Jasper Swanenberg joining us, Operational Officer, working with return and reintegration. And please tell us, Jasper, what is your role within Frontex?
Hi, Lisa. Hello to everyone. Very nice to be here. Before we start, I first want to give the compliments to the Talk2Connect team with what you have received so far. I think you have a wonderful project. So let's start with some nice words. Well, what am I doing in the Frontex headquarters? I'm working in the post-return unit, and we are mainly focused on the establishment of a well-working reintegration program for all member states to be used to make return sustainable for returnees. A very important element there, of course, is return counselling. no sustainable return is possible if a person is not well informed, not well guided in the return process. So when we have a look at the strategy that the return coordinator just mentioned, we have taken it a bit further by developing a return reintegration counselling curriculum, because we truly believe, as also the return coordinator has mentioned, it's important that the job of a return counsellor is becoming a professional competence within the process of return. So the main focus is here within the headquarters of Frontex to establish a curriculum. We have started with that a year ago, and we're further developing. But more about the curriculum later, because that's the main purpose of my
we are eager. We are eager to hear more.
Yeah.
I want to remind you that Jasper will take your questions afterwards, so do send them in through the chat. But otherwise, I will leave the floor to you, Jasper, to tell us more about the way forward. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Please go to the next slide. My name is Jasper Swanenberg, and soon you will see another face after my speech. Mr. Stijn Kwanten, who is a trainer within our framework, within our curriculum, and he will give you a snapshot of how a lecture looks like, so that you have an idea what a training is about. First of all, let's look at these pictures. These pictures are from several trainings that we have conducted so far. As I said, we started this year, first with a pilot training for the standing core officers of Frontex, and later with a pilot training for member states. And slowly we have conducted a handful of trainings. As you can see, only happy faces. The training is difficult, it's tough, it's very intense. That's always what we say to our member states if they request for a training. The treatment at the end is that they will get a certificate. So far, everyone has made it till the end. It is an individual training, of course, but it's the group work that counts. So now you have an idea how it looks like. Lots of group work, lots of individual work, frontal teaching. Well, I will say a bit more about that later on. Please go to the next slide. I will give you some background information where we started, where is it all coming from, so that you have a better understanding. Because the training and everything that we develop on return counselling is not falling out of the skies, of course. It's a concept that is quite complicated, as Marie mentioned, and that needs quite some investment, discussions with the member states, with all stakeholders that are part of this process. So it started in 2019 when the agency Frontex received a new mandate, a new regulation. With this new regulation, Frontex got more tools and manpower when it comes to return. Especially the focus on voluntary returns and reintegration is now an important pillar element in our daily work, in our daily bread, and also mentioned in the regulation. As many of you might know, Frontex has a standing core. Within the standing core, we have a specific profile called return specialists. Those are specialists coming from member states, being deployed in other member states to help them improving national structures. So that can be also in return counselling. So that is one important element. The other important element, of course, is to increase the number of returns. But to do so, we had to start with a training because it became clear that return counselling is not really aligned across Europe. So we got a request indirectly from the Commission and from some member states to put something together. We started with actually a more simple form of the training that we have now in 21. Unfortunately, COVID kicked in. That meant that we had to move the live training that we had in mind to the online world. In 21, not many people had experience with Teams and WebEx, but there was a reality back then. And we figured out that a full-time online training on counseling did not work at all, actually. Although the content was interesting and we got positive responses from the trainees, it was not what we had in mind, but that was the reality back then. So we took it back and we let it rest. Soon the AVR strategy was launched and implemented, and that helped us enormous to take it a step further and to deepen our objectives when developing the counselling curriculum. So it was necessary that we developed a work plan that was good for us internally, because also within Frontex, reintegration and counselling was a new topic. So when we started with this element, with this new subject, there were quite some eyebrows going up in Europe. I can proudly say that after 3 years of building and developing, there's a better understanding what we do, and what we do is always together with and for the member states. So we developed this work plan. In this work plan, it is stipulated what we have in mind when it comes to return counselling, and this is actually the sum of the strategy, our own regulation, and intense discussions and meetings that we have with the member states. The work plan was endorsed in 22, meaning that we could go live. I will say more about the work plan later, so you have an idea what else we do, because everything is interconnected with each other. We started with the first development sessions in 22, first with a small team, and slowly we had more people available and more assets, so we could spend more time on developing a curriculum. This resulted in the kickoff of a first training in January this year, here in Warsaw, for the first batch of return specialists. That was for us a very good rehearsal to see what works, what doesn't work, where we need to fine-tune the training, what we need to delete, and so on. So we could go back. We went back to the drawing table to change the training. That resulted in a new pilot for member states in May. And now it's December, and we are a few trainings ahead. We have done trainings in Italy, in Bulgaria, in Croatia, and in Cyprus. All very pleased to have received the training, and we really see that the training does make a difference. Apart from the training, we are developing tools and concepts. Also, a few words on that later on. As I said, it's all connected to each other, because a training is one thing. You need to invest in knowledge, because knowledge is power. But with only a training, you need more. So we also develop some tools that counsellors in member states can use during their preparation, during their work as a counsellor. The upcoming year, in 24, we will use for further training development, improving the current training, but also to develop new topics. This will result in a new work plan, because the current cycle is till 25, so we need to make a new operational work plan. Of course, this will be sent with all the stakeholders, and then in 25, we will start with the new cycle. So this is a bit of the background, so you have an idea, mainly focus on the counselling training, what we have done so far, and where we're coming from. Next slide, please. As I said, the work plan is consisting of 5 main objectives. As you see, the curriculum is actually the glue that sticks together. That's really the fundament of everything that we do. Without a curriculum, there's not much else to do, because then you will have loose islands, and now it's one fluid product. And it actually also, to refer back to what the return coordinator said, we need to have a toolbox, a European toolbox that can be used for member states, up to their request, up to their needs, of course. And that's something that we started, and we will build it out. So therefore, the curriculum highlighted in yellow, it's the most important subject we're working on. But next to that, we are working on simple communication tools for the counsellors. You see at the background a poster that we have developed. We work on brochures, we work on information, country leaflets on the website. We make sure that counsellors in the future have all the information under just a few mouse clicks away on their screen or in hard copy versions on their desk that they can use in the preparation for a counselling session. And an important other element is the exchange of knowledge and expertise. We need to gain information from the member states. We need to know what is happening. Where are the challenges? Where are the questions? Where does the infrastructure need to be improved? We have launched together with the European Commission last year, we have launched a survey among all the member states, and we are still, until today, using the data for further development of all the products that we produce. Apart from that, in the new year, on the longer term, we also want to develop a platform, a discussion platform with the member states, where we will discuss the topic of return counselling, as I said, to deepen it more and to focus on specific matters. An important other element is innovative concepts that we have developed. There are still quite some topics on the drawing table that we have not developed yet. We do it one by one, but that's something also for the longer term. It's important that we connect counselling to reintegration, and that we advocate voluntary returns, and that we make returns sustainable. So with only a training and with only some communication tools, there's more to win there. For example, what we do, we try to bring the reintegration partners with whom we have a framework partnership agreement with under the Juritsch framework, bringing them, connecting them with the member states for a better understanding and for a more fluid communication stream. Last but not least, we shouldn't forget, of course, where the people are coming from and where they're going back to. That means home. Third countries. We are investing, Frontex is investing in the relationships with third countries, meaning that we have already passed quite some meetings and workshops with them. When we project this on counselling, because we call it Return and Reintegration Counselling, what I've been discussed so far was mainly focused on return counselling. Reintegration counselling is a very important element. What do you do when the migrant, when a returnee has returned? It doesn't stop. So we need to monitor the fact that someone receives the proper reintegration system that is promised to this person and that this person needs. But it means also to help this person coming back, to build up a social network and to invest in a trust relationship. We want to give the third country authorities ownership here. It's very important that they understand what it means for returnees to go back and what the returnees need in order to build a better life. More on this topic will come the upcoming year. Quite some interesting projects are being cooked at the moment. So far the work plan. So you have an understanding how the toolbox as we have it now looks like. Now I will dive deeper into the curriculum, the training. Please, next slide. This is lots of text. I will push you through all what is written here. How is the training built up? We have a curriculum, which is actually the bigger name of the training, because the curriculum consists of 2 trainings, one for the Standing Corps and one for member states. The content of the training is for 90% the same. The difference is that for the Standing Corps, the training is a bit more extensive, is a bit longer, and we go here and there a bit deeper into detail. For the member states, the training is purely 5 working days, just 1 week, which is already a lot. You see here 7 blocks in color. These are the main modules of the training. This is where the training is built up with communication, psychological aspects, return counselling in practice, return reintegration counselling, return reintegration assistance, vulnerable groups, legislation, and fundamental rights. Communication is the key. That's where we start in the training. It's a module that takes 2 days. We start slow. Every time when we go to a member state, because the trainings are being organized in a requesting member state, we always need to feel the temperature, the level of the group, the willingness, the level of English. Very important, because the training is from time to time very technical. We have a group with very specialized trainers who have helped us developing this training and conducting the training. And among the trainers, we have different profiles. So for them, every time it's a matter of adaptation. We start with communication, communication skills, non-verbal communication, intercultural communication. How do you deal with different nationalities, with different cultures? We have lots of exercises there. We have a role play. So to give the trainees a feeling how the reality looks like. Of course, a very important element is the motivational interviewing. This specific submodule is not part of the member states training, simply because there's not enough time. We had to squeeze everything in 1 week, but this is part of the training for the Standing Corps. Our plan is to, in the future, make a separate specialized course on motivational interviewing only for those member states who are really in need of receiving this subject. Psychological aspects this training is developed by someone with a psychological degree, so has quite some experience and theoretical background when it comes to psychology, but also in daily work and experience with migrants. So we start with, how do people behave? What does stress mean? What does it mean for a migrant to sit in a boat and to come to Europe? We start small and we make it bigger. For example, lots of time is focused on PTSD. Also the effects for the returnee and the counsellor. What does it mean for a counsellor? Because we also try to flip, we try to change the situation. Because you need to be focused on the returnee, of course, but it can have an effect on a counsellor. What does a counsellor do with the things that he or she hears, and how do you deal with that in your daily work? Another very important element is the decision-making process. How does the mind, the brain of a migrant works when a very important decision needs to be made? For example, do I go back voluntarily, yes or no? Or do I wait till I receive a return decision? Do I want to have reintegration assistance? Are they lying to me? Can I trust them? This is a very interesting module. This is actually set up by FedAsil, Belgium. So we have a specialized trainer on this topic who from A to Z is taking actually the trainers on a journey when it comes to how you can advise and influence a migrant in a soft way in this process. Return counselling in practice is a very practical, as it says, a practical module. It's one day, but it consists of several small subjects. For example, how do you prepare for a case? What information as counsellor do you need to have before you start talking to a migrant? Who are your stakeholders? Are there stakeholders who are assisting you, or are there stakeholders who obstruct the return process? How do you create a safe environment for yourself, but also for the migrant? And how do you work on trust? It's a very busy day. We always feel that after this day, the people are totally exhausted, because then we're just throwing quite some information and practical examples to them. But this module is often at the end of the training, and then we see that slowly the dots are being connected and that they understand what it is all about. But we start this day with the role and objectives of a counsellor. It's very important, and I think that's the essence of this curriculum, that we need alignment across Europe. We need to understand what return counselling, what it means, especially when we want to professionalize the job profile of a return counsellor. So we start today with this, which is actually more than an open discussion, where we as trainers try to gather information from the trainees. How do you see it? How do you see it? How do you deal with this in your national service? Of course, also we go deeper into things that a counsellor absolutely should not do. And also a very important element here are the professional standards. How do you talk? How do you dress? How do you deal with people who don't want to talk with you? For example, how do you deal with an older Muslim man who doesn't want to talk with a female counsellor? These are practical examples that we discuss. Return and reintegration assistance, of course, this is a very hot topic, important topic, and it's also the future. Because we want to achieve voluntary returns, so reintegration assistance is the future. We lean, of course, on the Juritsch, but we also open the floor for national programs. We always try to make it customized to the country, the member state where we are conducting the training, by looking at the numbers that you're going through, the matter how they deal with reintegration assistance. So it's not only definition, but also what is available in that specific country. Case management. Why is it so important that all the data and facts are correct? How do you put it in the system? There's, of course, quite some attention given to the Riyadh system, but also to national systems. How do you make a report of the interviews that you do with a migrant? At the end of this module, we invite always a reintegration partner to join. And at this moment, we have two partners, Irara and Caritas, who join us, who explain their point of view, how integration system is being implemented the moment a returnee has returned. So how does that process looks like to make it very tangible and understandable for the trainees. Vulnerable groups, of course, also very important. What is a vulnerable group? What is a vulnerable person? Hereby we refer to the Return Directive, but there's much more than only mentioned in the Return Directive. There could be hidden vulnerables. How do you deal with it? How do you detect them? This is a hands-on module where we put the trainees together in groups where they need to have discussions and where they need to share experiences. How do you deal with minors? How do you deal with elderly? How do you deal with medical cases? How do you refer them? How do people get the treatment that they deserve and need? So this is a very important topic, and perhaps in the future we hope to do more on this topic in a separate specialized course. Legislation of the return process, to have a better understanding, of course, the background, the theoretical framework, we go through all the legal documents that are actually guiding a counsellor through the process. For example, a return decision is an important element that we currently discuss. This is a practical module where we try to make it not too boring, but we do expect that people, the trainees, also do some research before they start in the training. Before we start, we have sent them, we shared with them quite some reading materials which are sort of mandatory to read. So we know they're prepared, and then they understand that these topics will be discussed during the training. Fundamental rights, I don't think I need to go deeper into that. Of course, this is an important element, and we have a colleague within Frontex who is taking care of this, a colleague who's working for the Fundamental Rights Office. So, as you might have understood between the lines, it's a theoretical and an interactive training. It depends on the public that we have in front of us. The training is the same for every member state. However, we can customize it and we can change the accents here and there. It's really depending on how training is perceived. As said, for member states, it's a week. For Standing Core, it's 8 days. And the Standing Core at the end need to finalize quite a heavy assessment in order to be deployed by Frontex in another member state. We work with 6-7 trainers per training. This is also to keep it alive for the trainees, and that they understand that, well, it's good for the atmosphere and not to see every day the same face. But we have among our trainers specialists on specific subjects. So it's good to have a specialist in front of you talking very interested about a specific topic. So that is the training as such, content-wise. Next slide, please. Let me explain to you how we try to organize it. Because although we have everything on paper, it's every time again quite an organization. So as said by me beginning, but also by the return director, return coordinator, it is of course important that we work towards a professional job profile. This training is an individual training. It is meant to improve personal and professional skills. However, it's also group work. Often we hear at the end of the training that trainees come to us and they say, it was so interesting. Actually, I've learned also quite some things that I can use in my daily life. So we always send them back home to try back home with the family what they have learned so far. So that is for us also a sign that it's hands-on and it's understandable. We try not to make it that dry, because at the end of the day, counseling starts actually after this training. What we do, we give them a starting point. We have 28 member states. That means 28 different systems. In every country, it's organized just a little bit differently. So therefore, we say to them, listen, you start with this training, you take it home, and you need to adapt it to your way of working, to your personal profile. We give them new insights, new approaches, But at the end, also, this training is meant to support national systems so that they can use the knowledge and all the things that they have learned, that they take it home with them, and that they, how they do it, that they try to insert it in the national systems, and that they discuss with colleagues about the training. Well, as I said, the setup, it's interactive, it's dynamic. As you saw on the pictures, we don't have any tables. That means people are sitting in a circle. That is in the beginning very uncomfortable, very confrontational, because people are not really eager to speak, to talk. Sometimes there is an issue with the English language. We try to support them, of course, but also to support them to just deliver as much as input as they can. Lots of exercises that warms the group always up. But it's important that we have an environment of trust, because here and there, sometimes it is tricky, especially when we talk about the psychological aspects. Then we ask people also to tell their personal stories. And that's not always easy, because sometimes people, they are willing to speak out very personal things, which is good, of course, for the group spirit. As I said, it's a customized approach. And at the end of the training, there's an assessment for the standing core. However, we have started with a very small assessment for trainees from the member state training by giving them a multiple choice test. And for them, it's not a matter of pass or fail. Everyone will, of course, get a certificate by following the training, but it's also good for reflection, that they understand what they have done so far and to see if they have understood the materials. The audiences for our training are, when we talk about the member states training, national practitioners in the member states, can be return counsellors, can be social workers, everyone who's working in the domain of return, but it's up to the member state to appoint and to nominate people. If you are interested in the training, then please talk to your superior and to your manager, talk with colleagues, and make sure that you're nominated, of course, because there we don't have any influence. We talk with the member states, and if Belgium or the Netherlands that say that they want to have a training, then we start to organize, but we don't have a say in who is nominated. Ideally, we conduct a training for new and existing return counsellors, but that's an ideal picture. We also already had quite some police officers in our training, which is totally fine, but they have a different approach. The good thing of that is if you have very diverse group with different profiles, it's good for the discussion. So that's always a benefit. Trainers, as I said, we have a group with quite some specialized trainers. At this moment, our pool consists of 20 trainers, and we try to mix them. So we try to combine trainers who are very active and lively with some calm trainers, also for the dynamics in the training. The trainers are coming from Belgium, Netherlands, Sweden, Croatia, Slovenia, Denmark, and Austria at the moment. For those trainers, we have sent out a call last year, and quite some specialists in Europe have responded to that. 5 Frontex trainers, including myself, and we have at this moment 2 integration partners also on board. With figures, what have we achieved so far? In 23, we have done 6 trainings, and next year we plan to have 8 member states trainings and 1 training for standing core, which will take place in January for 30 participants. So far, we have trained 97 persons. That's quite a high number, and we hope that this number will rise and will increase, of course. What do we expect? How are the logistics arranged? Member state requests a training. The training takes place in the member state. For that, the only thing that we ask is appropriate training location, a big room, and maybe some coffee and cookies. That would be nice, but we need a proper training room, and the rest will be organized and financed by Frontex. That means that the trainers that's all arranged at our account. We make sure that the trainers will be there on time. In case, because the maximum is 20 participants, not more, because otherwise the group will be too big. In case a member state wants to have training for just 5 or 6 persons, that's not a problem. We've done it in the past. We combine the training with multiple nationalities. Here we look at the regions, of course, so that people from the same region are in the same training group. We try to have a monthly training if our finance and logistics will allow us. One important other element is a training catalog. So far, we have been building the training and redeveloping it and fine-tuning it. We've constantly improved our modules. I know that at different network meetings I've promised a catalog. It has been paused a bit. For sure, this will come in the new year. This catalog we share with the member states and everyone who's interested, and this catalog explains the training in detail, all the modules, all the logistics. It's a product to present the training. So everything that I've said now, more or less, will be captured in a catalog. Please, next slide or next click. See, so if you're interested, one back, please. If you're interested, please send us an email to this email address. This is, of course, you cannot click on this link. Write it down. Even if you have questions on the training, we are more than happy to assist and to answer all the questions that you have, maybe even after this webcast. Okay, I think everyone has noted it. Short, a few words on the way forward. So what is the future look like? We will continue with improving and continuing and enhancing the current content training. We'll make a planning till the end of this year. As I said at the beginning, we're working on a new work plan. There will be more the
It seems like we lost contact shortly with Jasper. While we reconnect, I can tell you, you've seen the chat, lots of questions coming in, and we will pick them up, of course, as promised later on when we open the floor for Q&A. We tried to reconnect with Jasper Swanenberg. I know that he was in the end of his presentation now, so if not, we cannot get hold of him right now. So why don't we jump straight to the break that was planned, a short 5-minute break. Then I will introduce my next guest, Stijn Kwanten, who will give us a sneak peek of one of the lectures that Jasper mentioned here in his presentation. And Pernilla, you keep an eye on the chat and gather the questions that we will take with us later. But now leave the screen on and go fetch a new cup of coffee, 5 minutes, and then we'll be back here. Welcome back to this webcast on the EU strategy on voluntary return and reintegration in practice. We lost connection with Jasper Swanenberg at Frontex just before the break, but I think we reconnected now. Welcome back, Jasper. We lost you. You were just talking about the final, your final slide of your presentation, talking about the way forward. And please, you can. I'll have you finish it now.
Oh, okay, thank you so much. Something went wrong. I will spend just 1 minute on this. I'm not sure if the slide is on the screen. Just to give you some last words on the way forward. So, what is going to be expected? We will keep on investing in improving the current training, but as I mentioned before, we want to extend the toolbox when it comes to the trainings. We will start developing a multipliers training. What is that? That is nothing more than a train-the-trainer concept. We're going to train, that's the plan, specialists in the member states on being able, having the ability to give the training to their own peers and colleagues in their own member state. We have already a train-the-trainer concept ready within Frontex. What we need to do now is to mirror it and to fix it with the content training on return counselling. For that, we're going to use the same pools of trainers, and that will be kicked off in 25. We start the upcoming year with the development there, because we see there is a growing need in receiving trainings, and now we only organize trainings on a monthly basis. But it's important that the member states take ownership and that they are able to train their own people with the focus on their own national system. Other two important elements are, as I mentioned before, we try to start with a development of standalone modules on specific topics. That can be one of the topics that I've mentioned before as part of our training. For example, medical cases or psychological aspects, or how do you deal with vulnerables, motivational interviewing, very specific topics that member states need. We will slowly start together with the member states, develop this the upcoming year, and the first pilot is expected not sooner than 25. Last very important element before I will be cut off is the investment that we do in third countries. We need to give them ownership. We want to give them ownership. They need for that a training or a coaching. So what we plan to do is to organize coaching sessions with third country authorities. The first pilot is planned next year. We are already in touch with a handful of third countries who are really eager and interested. And again, we will do this with the same trainers and with the same training materials, but the focus here is reintegration assistance. So the starting point is the return of the returnee, and that's actually the main focus on this training. So that was it actually so far. Didn't need much time, so gladly pass the floor back to you, Lisa. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jasper. Many things ahead of us waiting in the field of return and reintegration, we can see. And there are lots of questions for you and for Marie Juritsch in the chat. We will come back to that later, because now I want to introduce my third guest for today. And joining us from Ghent, we have Stijn Kwanten. Welcome to Talk2Connect. You're going to give us a sneak peek of an online lecture that is usually given within the Frontex training. And I know you have a background as a return counsellor within FedAsil yourself, and I know you prepared an introduction, so I leave the floor to you, Stijn.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for having me. From my part, also, good afternoon and welcome here. Before to introduce you into a lecture, very shortly, my background is I have a bachelor's degree in family science, and I have up till now almost 30 years of experience in the field of migration and asylum seekers. A background in reception facilities in the Red Cross, but also the last 15 years in policy preparation and voluntary return within the Belgian agency of FedAsil. That's the reason why I stepped into this Frontex training, because I can share my experience as a counselor, but also my experience as a trainer and a developer of trainings. As Jasper said, we are aiming to get a more harmonious approach on return and reintegration counseling, but also sharing knowledge and insights which a counselor can use in his or her job back home. And the training aims to provide, to show really hands-on tools that are useful in the daily job. Very classical teaching every now and then, but we aim to do it very interactive. We learn by doing, we learn by making mistakes in the group. We are connecting dots between several trainings, but also between the theory and the practice we gain during the training and the counseling jobs in the member states. We invest quite some time in a group atmosphere where it's safe to learn, but also where it's safe and pleasant to give feedback and to refine yourself. We do realize that it's a lot of information, a lot of knowledge that we push into the trainees, and we aim that the counselors will fill their backpacks during the training, and by doing their jobs back home, they can put out some things from that backpack to use back home. Next slide, please. What we do every training is we start with some basic, well-known subjects as some ideas about communication. For example, this communication model is the representative of the communication process as we know it, and this is the really beginning of the training because it will show you an insight on the subjective processes between perceiving the capturing your environment and how it has an influence on your behavior, on how you will act in your communication. It will show you insight on the processes in your subconscious level, how you perceive reality, how you process reality, but also how does has an influence on your behavior and how it will affect your communication. It's very theoretical, which is fine because during the training, and it's mainly the first day, we build on awareness on how I am looking as a counselor on this conversation. How do I observe what I see, what I hear? How do I put this into my internal filters? How does this influence my thoughts, my feelings, my behavior, and how will that have an impact on the way I'm dealing with this conversation? It will also give you an insight on how does it come that things are not going like it's meant to be. How does it come that it's so difficult sometimes to deal with a migrant in front of me, which might happen that I have a different interpretation of body language, a different interpretation of cultural aspects, and so on. Yeah. In the middle of this picture, you see some filters. For example, the beliefs, values, identity of every person, so also a return counselor, filters that are very determined by culture. And even though that return counseling is mainly a face-to-face activity, it's an individual approach, and we are all human, we are all unique in a certain way. There is a huge impact of culture on the way you perceive reality. And that's why I would like to dive deeper into the component of culture and communication. Next slide, please. I would like to introduce you to the 6 cultural dimensions of Professor Hofstede. Professor Hofstede and his team conducted a tool, if you want, where they make up 6 dimensions, which must give you an insight on how people of different cultures, grouped as nationalities, make an interpretation of some dimensions within this concept. For example, it gives the independent references for one state of affairs onto another from each other. As I said, return counseling is an individual thing, but in preparing a counseling, in being aware of this man or woman from Ghana or from Brazil, she might have an influence, a cultural influence on how she's looking towards 6 dimensions. So in your preparation, you can be aware of that and adapt your style. 6 dimensions very quickly. We will start with power distance. We will have an idea. We will talk about how the individualism versus collectivism has an impact. Also masculinity, femininity, how do people compare with each other in uncertainty avoidance, or long versus short-term orientation, indulgence, restraint. It's a very theoretical approach, but in the training we learn trainees on dealing with somebody with a culture where for example, a lower power distance is appearing. How can you adapt your style accordingly? I will give you an example for in individualism and collectivism. It's good to bear in mind that most of the migrants we are working with during a counseling, they come from a culture where the factor of collectivism is more important than the individualism approach. So, for example, it's good that when you talk with somebody who is more collectivism, that it's good that you talk not only about his or her plans, knowledge, values, but also that you bring up what are the plans, the knowledge, and the values of the family, and how does, for example, loyalty works into making a decision, and how can you, being a counselor, be prepared or to pose the right questions into that counseling. Next slide, please. Also, in what Hofstede and his team developed was the culture factor. It's a real application. It's a website where you can type in different nationalities and the research will give you an insight on how these nationalities compare to each other based on the 6 dimensions. It has only a value when you compare it one to another. I just put it here to give you an example. 4 nationalities: Brazil, Ghana, India, and Sweden. It's very, maybe hard to read, but it will give you an insight on how these countries are compared to each other based on the 6 dimensions. For example, Sweden is more individualistic than collectivistic. There is a lower power distance. Things that you really can use during your counseling. Okay, that was it for my part. I would like to give the floor back to Lisa.
Thank you, Stijn. Interesting to hear this. I realized this was a snapshot from trainings that you give within the Frontex program, usually a longer lecture. We have lots of questions for all of you now, so you stay with us, Stijn, as I bring in Jasper Swanenberg back, and also Marie Juritsch, the EU Return Coordinator, and Pernilla is here as well. She's kept an eye on the chat during all the presentations, and I know that, Marie, you are a bit short of time, so we will start with a question for you. Pernilla, I know that there was a question from Marie. Maybe it can be to either one of you.
Yes, I guess it's both to Marie and Jasper. So I read it for you. Countries where we lack partners and agreements, how can we motivate and achieve sustainable return to those countries?
This is something that plays out both on a structural level as well as on for the individual counsellor that tries to find a way forward. In the cases where we do not have an agreement, how can that be tackled? I know that is something that the return counsellors have in mind. Marie, you have any thoughts on this?
Well, obviously, if we have no arrangements or agreements in place with a third country, then it becomes extremely important that we have good return counselling structures and also provision of reintegration services upon the arrival. So then the voluntary return is where we should be investing our efforts. Of course, at the same time, we should strive to have agreements and arrangements in place. I think we need to have a credible forced return option, but with the idea that we don't actually want to use it, but we primarily would like to see people returning voluntarily and also when needed with our support.
And how is this matter tackled in the discussions you have in your trainings, Jasper?
Well, first of all, I echo what Mario just said. It is, of course, quite a challenge if there's nothing arranged in the country of origin or country of return in this case. Then it comes to the knowledge and the skills and expertise of a counsellor, because at the end of the day, the main task of a counsellor is to make sure that the person is motivated to return. But if there is nothing to return to, then I think a counsellor needs to work very hard to make it happen and to make it sustainable. Of course, voluntary return is the main objective. But given the fact there are return decisions, if someone really needs to leave, even though there's no reintegration program available, then the process of forced return comes into place, and also based on that we discuss with the counsellors how to deal with this, and we give them just tips and tricks. But at the end of the day, it's the migrant who needs to make the decision to return, yes or no.
So, do you have this experience, Stijn? Anything to add to that in the situation where you have a returnee where you cannot really refer his or her to a reintegration support organization on the departure side?
Yeah.
Arrival side,
being
sorry.
a counsellor, being a counsellor, it happens that you have very little to offer, nothing to offer in the country of origin. But even then, it happened that a migrant told me, I know there is very little or there's nothing, but it still is home. So I will take care of myself, or I will fully rely on my family without any structural support. It happens.
We really have one more kind of connecting question, so I bring that up now. So it's about the role of the counselor. Should the counselor influence the person's decision or provide a basis for an informed decision? You were kind of into that, Stijn.
Yeah. That's a tricky one. The main job of the counselor is to inform correctly and accurate and actual and complete information in a professional way. Sometimes I say that it's even not our role to give advice. We are there to provide information, to coach people taking a decision. It's not up to us. I mean, we are guiding them so they can make an informed decision. That's the main core, the main role.
Yet the idea is, as you said, Mari, with all these work put in to increase the numbers of voluntary returns. So for the caseworkers, how should they think of this? I mean, isn't there still a demand to increase the numbers put on everyone, each and every one?
Of course, what we want to do is to increase the numbers, and we also need to be much faster with our return processes. So it's not right that people are in a situation and uncertainty for a very long time. But I believe that the reason why we are facing such challenges is that we haven't really thought about what return case management should be like. So there are a few member states who have done really a remarkable job and have showed the way for the others. And for me, it seems this is now something that the others are also following. And I believe that the investments that we are making in return counselling and the work done by return counsellors will really help to make things better. I think in some countries, the practice is that when the decision has been taken, the person gets a letter. And then one has to take it from there and figure out by oneself. So what is it that this all means, and what I should do, or should I not do anything? So I think that this whole communication aspect and really managing cases and having the return counsellor there providing the information and enabling the person to really understand where she or he finds himself or herself, and then think about the next steps is really very critical. And it's a kind of an innovation. It seems obvious and natural thing to do, that if we are working with people, that we need to be there and tell them. I mean, most people are really out of their own country in a completely strange culture. So you are really dependent on kind of a different snippets of information that may come from peers or they're not. So, or just from social media, you get some ideas, might be completely wrong ideas. So I think counsellors really play an important role, and there's enormous potential to do a lot more, and also to be that factor, then help the returns take place more effectively.
So to put it straightforward, you believe that trained counsellors, better trained counsellors, actually can lead to higher rates of voluntary returns. That is the idea of this.
Well, it's about voluntary returns and returns. I think that everyone who gets a returns should be informed of the situation where one finds oneself. So what are the facts and how the way forward looks like? What are the options? So I think that there should be counselling for everyone. And actually there's one member state in Austria where counselling session is mandatory for everyone who gets a return. I think it's really very critical and important, and I hope that step will be taken by the others as well, that return counselling is built in as part of the regular return case management. Could be that for particular cases, as we heard from Jasper, that you have a vulnerable groups, you have in medical cases, you might have special requirements for counselling that you need to understand. So there are special profiles, but I think that it should be, as I said, become professional competence, and we need to have return counselors as part of all services that deal with returns. So I see it as really very much in the core of returns, and it's still something that is taking shape and is missing in many countries.
And I heard you mention the importance of professionalizing this task. Does that mean that you see it as a specialized work in the future? I mean, this is something that you do solemnly. This is a high level of expertise that, I mean, today this is something you do amongst other things within your agency usually. Any thoughts on that? Is this a future specialist working on return?
Well, I think it would be wonderful if there would be such specialists. I made my career within different services as an analyst, and usually those services were mainly, the other posts were occupied by, let's say, police officers and so forth. But I came with enough a background, and analysis was a rather new thing. But now you can see that there are more and more different kinds of analysts in working different kinds of policing services, in migration services, it's a new competence, and people did it as a side job, but it is a special professional competence. You need to have certain kind of handicraft skills and people skills, and I believe return counselling is also such a job that it would merit to have a kind of a professional identity of its own, and the competencies should be is having some kind of a competence even as a sidetrack for return counselling is of course better than nothing. But I believe that we need to start thinking about that as a capability of its own, as a competence of its own, and in an optimal world we would have people whose full-time job is to do return counselling. That's what I would like to see personally.
And that will be your last takeaway. Thank you so much, Marie Juritsch, for joining us. I know that you will have to leave now at 2 o'clock. Thank you for joining Talk2Connect today, the return coordinator in EU. I will keep the other two a bit, if that's okay with you, because I'd like to hear, Stijn, from you, your thoughts on this return counselling being something of an expertise. Is that how you have been able to work with it?
Yeah, I mean, doing return counselling is of course an on-the-spot job that you learn by doing. The theory you gain during a training will definitely help you. But what I do recognize during a training is that there's always a lot of expertise and knowledge in the group. And what we see is that every trainee brings his or her expertise and knowledge into the training, and we put some knowledge and tools and skills. We put it on top, or we give some more fundament to what they already know, and that's really the surplus. That's really the high value of the training, where you see a process of people who are already very talented within a week, where they can develop themselves, where they can learn from each other, and where they
and build on what has been accomplished already. Pernilla, from the chat, any questions?
Yes, we have some question here for you, Stijn. And that's about what you talked about already. What are the main challenges return counsellors face?
That's a huge question.
Yeah,
that's a tricky one. What comes back a lot of time is the time issue. I mean, counselors who say, well, of course, we want to have more time and expertise to do a counselling, but it's a lack of time because we have other things to do in our daily job. It's always under pressure. It's a lot of stress, and to build up a good professional, individual relationship with a migrant, we need more time to do so. So that's one thing that always comes back, which has a high impact on counselling. Another thing is that counsellors today, more than ever, in my opinion, are in need of a good network, a network around them with other people, of course, reintegration partners in the third country, but also in the guest country. Counsellors are in need of having a background of a professional network where they can rely on to do their jobs, because it's not something you can do alone.
And this, the time factor is something we have heard a lot of during this year. And I'm also thinking about the differences between counsellors working for NGOs and counsellors working for state agencies, whereas the state agency counsellors often feel more pressured to deliver. I was wondering, Jasper, this landscape as it looks today with both NGOs and state agencies working together on this, what are your thoughts on this? Can they complement each other like they do today, or you see something else ahead of you?
No, absolutely. I think they must complement each other. Otherwise, you cannot talk about sustainable return or integration. I mean, we organize the training mainly for the member states because we are an EU agency. That doesn't mean that we don't connect and talk with the NGOs. Look at our 5 partners. However, we don't deliver training for them. In quite some member states, counselling is being done by NGOs primarily. The content of counselling as such is actually the same. It doesn't matter if it's being done by a state or by an NGO. The way how counselling is being done maybe might change a bit, but the outcome should be the same. That's return, sustainable return, and make sure that the person is returned in a safe and proper way. If we talk about sustainable return and integration, it's very important, and that's a very important pillar that constantly we repeat during our training, is that a state counsellor or NGO counsellor, depending on the system, is constantly in touch with the reintegration partner in the country of origin to make sure that everything is arranged in a proper way, to go through a checklist and not to be surprised. So in that sense, it's very important that processes are aligned and that you keep on communicating with each other.
So wrapping up now, I'm thinking one last question. With your future plan, it's stretched into 2025, but if we look more like 5-10 years ahead of us, where do you see return and reintegration within EU? Where will we be at? What questions will we be thinking of then?
Oh, that's a very complicated question. If only we could look into the future so far. I mean, if we focus on counselling, of course, because that's actually our purpose here today. As Mari mentioned, we want to work towards a system that all member states have the same understanding, and not only member states, but also everyone who's working in the domain of counselling, that we have the same outcomes and we have the same concepts and ideas. Because that would only benefit the returnee at the end. So that should be the most important thing, that we align so that we have more returnees in the future. And of course, by having reintegration, we also try to avoid a migration pressure in Europe, so that more people are coming, so that they stay in the countries, because we're investing in staying there. So that's very, very important. That's of course a long-term point in the agenda. But for now, it's important that we invest in the competences of counsellors, so that on the long term, in 5 to 10 years, we can pick the fruits out of that.
Stijn, do you have any last takeaways before we end this session today?
Yeah, I would like to add one more thing. When I'm doing a counseling, please bear in mind, and that's also a very important message we give to the trainees, bear in mind that you are still working with individuals, with people who came to Europe with some dreams and plans, and they are confronted with a completely different situation, so that we have to rethink, to understand them, to rethink their situation and to coach them through a meaningful situation, a meaningful future in their perception and not ours. So please bear that in mind. Yep.
It's a human being at the very center of this question, of course. But thank you so much for letting us in on the EU strategy on return and reintegration and how it will unfold in practice. Thank you so much, Jasper Swanenberg and Stijn Kwanten, for joining us today in Talk2Connect. By now, we have reached the end of this webcast. And if you want to hear more on what we have learned on your European return counselling throughout this year of Talk2Connect, do not miss the upcoming episode of the Talk2Connect podcast. And the webcast as well as the podcasts are available on YouTube. I said that a few times already. YouTube, search for Talk2Connect Return, and you find everything we produced throughout this year. But for now, then, thank you so much for joining us today. Pernilla and myself, we wish you a Happy New Year when that comes. And for now, have a nice afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye.